I'm guessing now, do you do a combination of diet, or is there a certain rule you follow in terms of eating? What is your nutrition?
So for myself, I don't necessarily, I won't say I follow a specific diet. When you think about our health and our life, we're all on a spectrum. And depending on where you are in that spectrum, well, you need to take certain steps. For someone who's healthy, who just wants to maintain, and as you age, things change, your hormones changes, everything changes. Then you want to do what's right for you at that end of the spectrum. But most of us, at least a good, maybe about 30% of the country, we're on the other end of the spectrum or closer to the other end, where we have certain conditions that we have to manage and try to reverse, because since they are reversible, to try to get back to a better state of health.
Welcome to American Gypsy Podcast. I'm your host, Gypsy, and today I have a special guest, Lorraine Cuff. She is a 30-year Air Force veteran, author, speaker, and primal master health coach with a unique background and a passion for health and wellness. Welcome to the show, Lorraine.
Thank you very much. I'm elated to kind of share my story with you today.
Glad to have you here. Today, we're going to be discussing a lot about health and nutrition. I know you focus a lot on that and have experimented with different types of diets and workouts and things like that. So, pick your brain on that. But before we get to that, can you talk a little bit about your background in the Air Force and what inspired you to get into that?
Well, certainly. So, as you stated, I just retired from the Air Force as a guardsman, a New Jersey guardsman. I started out as a Air Force reservist. I did some active duty time, did some overseas deployment, and I transitioned from the Air Force Reserve, which is federal, to the New Jersey Guard. And it was more of a promotion opportunity. My initial start with the Air Force was as an air transportation specialist, which basically we loaded and unloaded aircrafts. And as I grew up in leadership, I became the education and training manager for my unit. And the opportunity to become the wing superintendent presented itself with the National Guard. And that's why I finished up my career. And yeah, over the years, so I think something that you didn't mention, my parents are Jamaican, and my mom and dad, they actually met and married in England. And that's where the three kids were born. I'm the last of three. And they got homesick, like many people do, and they returned to Jamaica. That's where I spent my high school years. And then after high school, I migrated to New York City. If you can't work in New York, then it can't work anywhere else, as they say. And that's where I kind of started my career in health, in hotel and restaurant management, working with food. Being Jamaican, of course, love food of all types, but you learn after a number of years that not all foods are best for all of us. In the military, as I progressed in leadership, I wasn't as active as I was in my younger years. And that's when the pounds started to pack on, and you had to try to find ways of working those pounds off. Yes, there's a requirement for us to maintain our weight, but it's still a struggle when your job isn't on your feet and moving around as some other careers. Like someone in, let's say, the medical industry, a nurse, is more likely, not necessarily more likely, to burn off the extra weight every day because they're on their feet, they're on their go. But when you have a desk job, something that's more sedentary, then you have to really look at what you're eating and kind of make that change. So with the pounds packing on and some other conditions developing, I started exploring, what could I do to manage my weight? So yeah, and like I said, I've done the Jenny Craig and all those other things, and they worked for a time, but nothing really stuck. I even did the 90-day programs, and you name it. I kind of got involved with different things. And eventually, I wasn't diagnosed as pre-diabetic, but I noticed that the symptoms were starting to indicate that that's the trajectory I was going down. And I wanted to make sure that that didn't happen, because it's something that's very, very much present in my family. And that's when I discovered the Primal Health Institute and decided to get my certification, where I was already a life coach, but the life coach and a primal health coach kind of runs similar, because it's all about lifestyle. It's about what you do on a day-to-day basis, the foods you eat, and just making sure you're looking out for your own health. So that's when things started to really improve for me, and I just wanted to share that with my community.
Mm. Um, what did you find? I'm guessing now, do you do a combination of diets, or is there a certain rule you follow in terms of eating? What is your nutrition like?
So for myself, I don't necessarily, I won't say I follow a specific diet. I am more what I refer to as a ketovore. So I do a relatively high fat in comparison to some other diets. I do more, a higher protein and low carb. So it kind of fits, like I said, into that ketovore type of way of eating. And it just makes life a lot easier. It's easier for me because I'm challenged with counting calories. I just don't do calories. And
Mm.
that's why I forgot which diet it is where you have to, the point system. It's just
But
something I
I
couldn't
think
do.
is pretty like you do have to watch your carbs a lot. But I think you get used to it after a while. I've tried
Yeah.
keto for a while.
Yeah, and for me, watching your carbs is a lot easier, because if I know that if for breakfast I decide to have a slice of bread, I know that I've already satisfied close to 1/3 of what I want to eat for the day in terms of carbs. So I'll eat more vegetable, more meat, or something for the rest of the day. So basically, doing keto benefited me, and I think it's an easier track to follow. Um, Depending on what your goals are, because everything should be individualized and there's no one stop for all of us. When you think about our health and our life, we're all on a spectrum. And depending on where you are in that spectrum, well, you need to take certain steps. For someone who's healthy, who just wants to maintain, and as you age, things change, your hormones changes, everything changes. Then you want to do what's right for you at that end of the spectrum. But most of us, at least a good, maybe about 30% of the country, we're on the other end of the spectrum, or closer to the other end, where we have certain conditions that we have to manage and try to reverse, because since they are reversible, to try to get to back to a better state of health.
Mm. See, when I was doing keto, I struggled with the amount of, I guess, protein. And I talked to someone previously on the show about going vegan or not eating meat, and how that makes it hard for you to lose weight and stay healthy. So can you explain like your perspective on why you feel like meat it's you went the keto carnivore mixture? Because I did keto as well, but I kind of limited my meat intake and
Gotcha.
got my protein elsewhere.
Gotcha. So, but at least you did a decent ratio of protein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll do like pea protein and things like that. Um,
So, like I said, we're all at different end of the spectrum. I'm lactose intolerant, so I don't do I limit. I won't say I don't do. I limit dairy, so I'll do some cheese,
yeah.
but I don't do milk, so I'll do the alternative milk.
Mhm.
And also my because of the state of my microbiome, beans and we don't get along. So when you look at your protein source, you kind of really have to look where you get your protein from. I don't do much soy, which I could do, because soy is not um, organic, or as natural as it used to be. So yes, it's okay to have soy. Like I said, that's not my preference, but you still have to be very much aware where your source of your soy is. And that goes for almost any food that you eat, even in terms of your meat, your animal-based meats. Are you eating pasture-raised meats versus, the typical commercial bought meats in the store? Because the nutrient composition of where you get the food from is going to vary. Your pasture-raised meats, it's eating greens, which means you're benefiting from the greens that those pasture-raised animals eat. Whereas the commercial grown or raised animals are eating corn or some other thing. And the nutrient composition of what they're eating is not sufficient to sustain them, much less yourself. So if you're not eating pasture raised and if you're not eating something that's nutrient dense, because that should be your objective, no matter what it is you're eating, it's best to eat nutrient dense foods so that you're eating sufficient of whatever composition of foods that you're eating. And I think that's where most of us end up falling short, unless, of course, that you want to buy a lot of supplements, which I try to avoid doing that because sometimes you don't know where the supplement sources are. And then when you go to the pure products, it's cost an arm and a leg. So I minimize the amount of supplements that I have to take by eating as much nutrient dense food. Your egg, an egg is nutrient dense because it's enough to sustain a life. Maybe not our life, but a chicken, a whole chicken which is a life, comes from one egg. So it has the nutrients that we need to help sustain us, I should say. And then the other thing that I do, and I said sometimes I turn off for a lot of folks, is coming from Jamaica, with the meats that we eat from nose to tail. So I grew up on liver and kidney and gizzards and all those types of food. So I have no objection to eating liver. Whereas, like, even in my family, so there's three of us. My sister's the eldest, my brother's the middle, and myself being the last one. My sister hates liver. So
Yeah, that's the one type of meat I don't like because it has a bitter taste to it.
that depends on how well it's prepared. It's like if you know someone so growing up, and for some reason, my mother, the way in which she prepared her liver compared to most people in the community was a lot more appetizing than people who cooked it to the point it was almost like leather. And because of that, I think that's why. And then because of myself going to culinary school, that also added to properly preparing the foods so that it is enjoyable. So, because I couldn't tell when last I've had a piece of liver that's bitter, but I have had bitter liver. So, and then you have people in the carnivore some people who don't like liver, they've learned they'll take bits of liver because you don't need a lot of liver to get the additional nutrients, macronutrients that you might need. They'll ground it up in their ground beef. So basically the taste gets hidden, but at least you're getting the nutrients. And there are people who actually will cut liver up, freeze it, and take it almost like a pill because it's almost like your multivitamin. So the thing is for us to educate ourselves on the different ways that we can include supplements, natural supplements in our diet without necessarily popping pills and kind of balancing things out. Liver is cow beef liver in particular is one of the most nutrient dense meats there is. In terms of has the vitamin A, a lot of the micronutrients is in liver. Now, if it's like say a pig's liver or anything that's from the pork for that matter, the nutrient composition in the pig essentially is different from that in the cow. Now, with that in mind, it doesn't mean that you have to have a whole host of it to get what you need, because in most cases, you just need trace amounts of food throughout that entire week. So yes, you kind of really have to explore. When it comes to fish, we all know that fatty fish is best on the norm, but that's not the case for everyone. You mentioned something to do with meats, like quite a few folks, whether African Americans or otherwise, stay away from meats, especially red meats, because of cholesterol. So the question is, what is your cholesterol profile? And now for myself, I'm hypocholesterolemia. So my numbers are always run high, but most medical practitioners, they don't look at the ratio of HDL to LDL, because if your ratio is where it needs to be, then cholesterol is not that much of a concern. Your overall numbers is not that much of a concern for someone who doesn't have a high HDL numbers. But most practitioners look at that high number and they go, oh my gosh, your cholesterol is too high. You need to cut out this, you need to cut out that. But I recall the very first time I was told that my cholesterol was high, and they looked at my numbers. This was when I was in my 20s. And so this doctor basically looked at everything in detail and says, I don't have anything to worry about because my HDL is high in comparison to everything else. So I had the excellent ratio. And being in the military, we have to do our fitness tests and we do our medical tests annually. And I've been prescribed statins to lower my cholesterol. And I think another doctor that I had, my own private doctor, who basically looked at the detail, looked at the numbers and says, that's not something that I need. And because I didn't have any concerns. And to put and my last doctor, to put their concern at rest, I requested them to schedule me for a coronary artery scan. And what that does, it basically scans your arteries, your arteries of your heart, to see if you have any buildup, any plaque buildup to be concerned about. So I did that test, and my score was close to 0. So that put me even more at ease, not to even be concerned, not too concerned. Not that I'm going to go on a meat fest and do more than I need to, but cholesterol is not a concern of mine. But that's not necessarily the case for everyone, because everyone has their own baseline. It's important to do your baseline test to see where you are. And even if particularly if you're aware of your family history, because your genes does play a part in your health. And then you go from there.
For me, the reason that I limit it is for it doesn't digest as quickly. Like when I'm going through, I can lose weight. I can go up and down pretty quickly.
Mm.
And so when I go through my weight loss phase, you know, I'll have momentum. But then when I eat meat, the days that I eat meat,
Mm.
I'll be stagnant for a couple of days. Um, and I don't mean like I'm constipated or anything, but on the scale, it's just things aren't moving. And I know I'm working out and I know I'm eating right and all of that. And it stagnates me a little bit. So I started like cutting it out a little bit more. I still love meat. I don't hate meat, but it's hard for me when I go back home because it's a lot of eating meat and I gain weight every time. And most people go to Ethiopia and they lose weight every time. But me,
Mhm.
every time I go there, I gain all my weight back. So that's the struggle for me.
Mhm. And not to convince you of one or versus the other, because like I said, it's different for
Yeah, I
everybody.
just like getting different perspectives. It's not.
Yeah. So the blood type diet. Now, I don't know the science behind it, but um, I know there is something to the blood type. So maybe your blood type is more attuned to a vegan type of diet more so than a carnivore animal-based diet. But there's also the fact that one of the things I've learned is this kind of, not that I don't weigh myself, but I don't weigh myself that much. I rely on measurement, the feel of my clothes, because I do know that the more protein that I eat, I'm more likely building muscle and not it has nothing to do with fat. Maybe there's a certain amount of fat, but I am building muscle, and muscle strength and the amount of muscle you have is important when it comes to longevity. So there will be times when eating protein may benefit you over eating vegetables, a lot of vegetables, I should say, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So your bone density, your muscle strength are extremely important for aging. And which doesn't, I won't say it doesn't, is not as relative when it comes to weight gain or weight loss, right? Because weight gain, weight loss has to do with your weight versus the state of your muscles and how much fat you have. One of the things I guess I try to make sure I control is my waist. How much fat am I, gaining along the middle section? and the different things that impact that, because not only what I eat, there is the amount of stress I'm going through at any given time. There is, am I getting sufficient sleep? And am I moving enough? Because being in the military, being younger, I had no problem, very athletic, and over the years, damage to my knees, different things. I don't work out as much as I used to. So, okay, since I don't work out as much, even though there's some folk where exercise is not their thing, movement within itself is what's important, and not necessarily vigorous exercise. So with that in mind, kind of lost my train of thought for a second. But with that in mind, are you getting a minimum of 6 hours per sleep? Because it is during the night or during the time that you're sleeping that your body is going through its repair and restore phase. And if you're not getting enough sleep, then you're not burning off and getting rid of the waste that your body needs to get rid of throughout the night. Because it's in the appropriate, it's in your, I forgot what stage of sleep, is a certain stage of sleep where this occurs, and not just when you just, doze off. If you're not sleeping well, it's not good. So sleep hygiene is important. Then there is, as I said, was sleep, movement, and I forgot that third one, which I mentioned. It'll come back to me. But you kind of have to kind of measure those things. What time of day are you eating? Are you giving your body enough time to rest? Are you doing any type of fasting? Fasting, almost anyone can fast, but you have to have the mindset to do it. It's because I remember with my sister in particular, when I told her that I was doing intermittent fasting, I told her, she said, me? Oh, I never do that. And slowly but my sister is one, because I'm the little sister. So, little sister is never right. Whatever I said, it would be taken like a grain of salt. But I'd find out later on is that she started doing intermittent fasting, and it worked for her. But that initial mindset of doing something that you're not accustomed to, some people just don't have not open-minded enough to say, you know what, let me learn about these things and see if I could benefit from it, instead of just right away saying, oh, I would never do that. I have to have my breakfast, and not recognizing that if you can, the bigger your fasting window is, then the more your body will burn. If you push off your body's, you want to minimize your insulin spikes, basically. So, and that's where fasting comes into play. The science of it is, when it comes to insulin, because insulin is basically what is a growth hormone. It basically packs on the weight. It stores energy for us, which is great, when we need that energy to run or to do anything we need to do. But anything in excess is going to be stored in your muscles and be converted to fat, get stored in our liver, and so on and so forth. So some people can eat food in large quantities and not an issue. Some people have to eat food in smaller quantities, and that's what works for them. But like I said, it's one of those things you kind of experiment with and see what's going on with you. But the biggest measure, especially as we age, is what's going on with our waist. I remember stress was the other one.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that too.
Yeah, stress. So in particularly, let's say over the past year, I put on quite a few pounds, because unfortunately we had a situation. My father passed away this past December, and he was diagnosed with lung cancer from an industrial disease. He worked when he was working in England, right after World War II. A lot of folks were exposed to asbestos during that time frame. And regardless, I mean, the good thing with my dad is that he had still lived very well for very long. My dad passed, he was 92 years old. He was still driving. He was still he would do 2 to 3 mile walks every morning. He didn't cook. My mom did most of the cooking, but he would eat. He didn't eat as much as he used to eat when he was younger, but he had a decent appetite. When I say he drove, he would be up and down. He didn't drive much at night because, of course, his vision wasn't as great as it was. But for a 92-year-old, he was doing quite well for himself. But when the family found out that he was ill, and just trying to dealing with those things, his passing and everything else, it took a toll on me and everybody else in the family. And I think for me, food, like for many of us, food is comfort. We like the comfort food. It kind of makes us feel good for whatever reason. It brings out those feel good hormones. And it just was not, eating right was just not my priority, because I didn't want to end up being depressed or anything of that kind. And I knew that I could, once I get through that episode of dealing with the grief and everything else, I know what to do to bring myself back. But stress, whether it be, not that you're going to eliminate all the stress in your life, because stress is good to an extent, but you don't want to remain in a stressful state for too long. And it is the stress that, especially us as women and men, but especially as us as men, for some reason, as we age and we start we worry about the kids, we worry about our partners, we worry about the job, we worry about our getting paid, and all this stress and worry consistent is what creates a situation where we're putting on the pounds in our midsection.
Mhm.
So those are the things we should get under control: stress, sleep, and and
Nutrition.
well, the nutrition goes
Well,
with
yeah.
yeah, but they're basically key things that we need to control, and recognizing that as we age, because of where our hormones change, and the hormones change more drastically for us as females than for males, that we have to stop and pay attention to what's going on. I know there's a tendency quite often, if you're a female that wears slacks, and this is something I did with one of the jobs I had. So I used to wear trousers or pants that had buttons, and you're working day to day, doing in and out. So everybody else in the office, I think just because, I don't know why, I just decided to adapt what everybody else did, starting wearing pants with elastic waist. So when you wear the pants with elastic waist, you don't pay attention to what's going on until one day one of your favorite outfits doesn't fit you anymore. And you're like, uh-oh, I got to do something about this. So the only um, attire that I have that has elastic waist is my jogging pants. Everything else has a button, so I know exactly what's going on every time I pull an outfit out of the closet. And even if I have something with a belt, you notice on your belt, the notch where you use, there's usually a mark on the belt to say, okay, this is where my waist is. And then one day you put that belt on, like, wait a minute, it's not at the hole that it's supposed to be. And you kind of tune in to what's going on. So, yes, there's other ways of paying. The scale is not the best way to monitor what's going on with you,
For sure.
because at any given time, fat versus muscle, because putting on muscle is not a bad thing, and muscle is heavier than fat. So, and you want to be able to maintain as much muscle strength as you can as you age.
Mhm. Yeah, and actually, even because the scale can be damaging mentally too, and can hinder your progress. That's why I have a scale that kind of measures, like it uses an app to kind of measure like your body fat percentage,
It's body scan.
visceral fat or whatever. And I focus on like visceral fat and things like that because I know it's on your organs. And as far as stress and hormones, it's funny that most people, when people say hormones, they automatically jump to, oh, it's a women thing. And it's becoming like hormones are, there's a lot of different hormones and it involves, it can throw everything in your body into, into haywire. So managing managing stress has been one of the things that I've had to focus on, finding different ways from drinking certain types of teas, doing certain activities, meditation, spending time in nature, things like that, because I felt like that was hindering. I know when your cortisol is off, it can hinder a lot of different functions in your body. What are some things that you do to manage stress, whether it's physical, mental, dietary?
So Well, one of the biggest thing when it comes to diet is basically making sure to stop eating at a certain time in
Mhm.
the evening, because you need to have that, um not that your body is stressed when you eat, but if you're consistently eating late and your digest, just like anything else needs rest, your digestive system needs rest. And I don't think people focus on that. Your eyes get rest, your hearing gets rest, but if you're eating late, then your digestive system is constantly working, and that can lead to something as bad as irritable bowel syndrome, where you have gaps in your villi, and food that shouldn't go past the cell barrier starts seeping into other parts of your body that shouldn't. And when that happens, it's usually something that we don't notice right away. That's quite often what people end up having brain fog and different cases and not realizing it.
Mhm.
So I try my best to stop eating by, if I'm working late, 8 o'clock's the latest I'll eat. But on the average, I try to stop eating by 6 o'clock in the evening. And my next meal is anywhere from 10 to 12 the next day, unless I'm intentionally doing an extended fast where I may not just eat, I may do one meal for the day. But I've been able to attune my body to get comfortable with um, that way of doing things. Um, I do meditate. I try to meditate. I have difficulty meditating at night because I'm just too sleepy. And at nighttime is when I just have too much going on. And so I meditate in the morning when I get up. I also, if you've seen me on Instagram, something I've been doing recently is 5 days a week, I go to a park in my neighborhood, and I do what I call my morning sunrise. So, and it's kind of just sharing with the world, sharing with people that I know sometimes they don't have the time to get up and see the sunrise in the morning. So I capture that as best I can and tell people, good morning,
Mhm.
and share it. And even if it's cloudy, it's still magnificent to see the sky and just to kind of embrace nature. I usually look for little animals, whether it be a squirrel, the deers, a beetle, and I'll take a picture and kind of post it, just kind of sharing that. So the meditation in the morning, just doing things to relax my mind. I've been trying to, and I haven't been kind of locked in on that, is stop being on the computer by a
Mhm.
certain time at night. When you're in the business where you're doing things virtually, it's a challenge, because sometimes I find that in the evenings for me, for some reason, my brain, it just works for me a lot better in the evenings, after 8, maybe because I stopped eating. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I, I'm able to get in that flow and kind of do my writing, do whatever I do. But in the back of my head, I know I need to get to bed. I need to get to bed. So I do try to get to bed by 10 o'clock at night doesn't always work, but that's the goal.
Mhm.
Um, so there's that. And like you mentioned, the eating certain foods. So I noticing what foods that I don't digest well, like for yourself, you said meat doesn't seem to sit well with you on occasions, and just really paying attention. My microbiome, I am certain, um, so depending on what you've been through in life, if you've had any incidences where you've been ill, where you've been prescribed antibiotics, without a doubt, those antibiotics have impact your microbiome.
Mhm.
So you're not necessarily where everybody else is. Not that you're unhealthy, but you're not where everybody else is. So you may not be able to digest effectively certain foods. And then, of course, if you were a C-section baby, your microbiome is going to be different. If you, depending on the work what you're exposed to on a regular basis, your microbiome is going to be different. So truly pay attention, because for years, I had a lot of flatulence. And I think most people were saying that the old adage is that, oh, you're eating too much meat, it's rotting in your stomach, that type of thing. But when I started experimenting and seeing, I stopped, I cut out food and that didn't help. So then I started paying attention to, I love the blooming onion from Outback.
Mhm.
that fried, yeah, I love fried onions. Growing up, I didn't like onions. I used to call them, because of how they were cut and how they looked on the plate, I used to refer to them as worms that look like ground worms. But I learned to appreciate onions. And now I can't cook with onions in my food. I can put onions, I'll cut it up large, then I have to pick the onions. The fiber in the onion, it gives me gas for whatever reason. So
Mm.
there's a lot of foods that just don't work for me. So I have to kind of, like says, identify what those things are. Doesn't mean that I can't tolerate a little bit every now and then, but just paying attention to what stresses my body, what can I digest and comfortably and not. They have what they refer to as a FOD diet. Sometimes there's two things. There's the FOD diet where you're eliminating certain foods for a period of time and seeing how it impacts your body. Because quite often we're so accustomed to eating our bodies get used to eating certain things and dealing with it, but it doesn't mean that you're not stressing yourself. And because your body wants to be at a certain equilibrium at all times with the food that you eat and how it processes things. So it finds a way to balance things out, but it may be impacting you one way or another. And until you eliminate those foods and then start, and you should do at least 10 days of elimination before you start putting that food back on your plate to truly identify if that food is good for you, is best for you. I won't say good, is best for you. So there's a FOD diet, and then there is carnivore diet. To me, the carnivore diet is the ultimate elimination diet.
Mm.
It's not for everyone,
But it
but
feels somewhat restrictive. That's the only thing.
it is. But the thing is, carnivore, there are people because of circumstances that carnivore is best for them 100%.
Mhm.
But I think the average person should probably only do carnivore if they're being investigative. You want to investigate what's going on with your body. Identify the meats or the animal source that is good for you. Plan out a 10-day period, 10 to 21-day time frame where you're going to eat nothing but animal source foods, and then reintroduce the other components. Don't go beyond the 21 days because you don't want your body to get too used to it unless that's what you want to do. But yeah, carnivore is like I said, I refer to as the ultimate elimination diet because you're eliminating everything else and you're just eating what is an animal based, which you are, you're animal based yourself. So you're not eating anything that's necessarily strange. And then you can start incorporating your other foods and identifying, okay, how is this impacting me? Type of thing. So and I went through my process of eliminating because I did carnivore for a while. I actually did what they refer to OMAD, 1 meal a day.
Mm.
And it's something is it takes, like anything else, it takes conditioning to sometimes address certain things. But I did that and I was able to identify, like I said, that certain foods don't sit well with me. And addressing those things, I know what gives me flatulence and what doesn't. And then there's a question: is flatulence something bad for you, or is it something that we're supposed to deal with? And I can't say it's bad or good. I know it's embarrassing.
Yeah, too much of anything was probably not good.
Yeah, I know it's embarrassing because you don't want to be in somewhere where someone is saying, "Well, who was that? Who?" So so I try to avoid putting myself in those situations. So yeah, so meditating, trying to eat, not eating past a certain hour, drinking as much water as possible, going out in nature, and just kind of embracing life, taking those times when you can just be by yourself and just tune into what's going on with you.
Yeah, I'm the biggest proponent of intermittent fasting because I feel like it it helps you listen. If you do it for long enough, it helps you kind of listen to your body a little
Mhm.
bit more. And then I realized it's easier to notice when you step off of it and you come back, you're like, oh my God, I was like aimlessly eating. And you feel like we eat too much, like 3 meals a day,
Why?
snacks, and your body insulin is just going yo-yo, and then your digestive system is having to work so much to digest them before it's even done. You put more food in.
Mhm.
So intermittent fasting, not eating is the best thing you can do for your body. Have you done like the long-term fasting, and how did
So
you?
I've fasted, what have I done? I've done 12-day fast.
Wow.
I think 12 days is the most I've done.
Mm.
So,
What
and
did you notice? Because I know when you do it longer, things start to heal in your body.
so when I did the 12-day fast, and the funny thing is like one time you do this long-term fast, it's hard to do it again. You really have to get your mind straight to get
Yeah.
to begin. But one of the biggest things that the people would look at me, oh, you have such beautiful skin, so there was a glow about me. My energy level, I won't say because my energy level wasn't low. So, but there was a difference in my energy level in general. Um, the Well, there's no bowel movement to speak of. So
Mm. Yeah.
during that time, in the beginning and near the end, I think with the long-term fast, it's encouraged to do some form of a laxative during that time frame because in particular during the beginning and the end. Um, but energy levels were great, and that was I think when I did the long-term fast was the first time I had a inkling that my sugar, my glucose levels was higher than it needed to be. So that was one of the key reasons why I embraced it at the time. But just knowing that so when I think about myself, my history of my health as a um teenager, I had a lot of acne. I had acne as a 20-year-old. I had acne, but not a lot of it, but I had it. I When I was an infant, I had a bout of gastroenteritis. So I think that was my first exposure to antibiotics as a child. And I've had other instances of having to take antibiotics for one reason or the other. And back then, I don't think there was a well-known connection between how antibiotics impact your microbiome. Um, what specifically would cause, I mean, the thing, like one of the first thoughts when you're young, when people see you have acne, they, oh, you got dirty skin, go wash your face or something of that kind. And then over the course of time, you learn that had nothing to do on an exterior because yes, I would shower, I'd wash my face, and they still have the acne, that it's something that's going on with you internally. It's something that I'm eating. And I relate all of that to the amount of carbohydrates that I ate. And it's not that I ate badly in the sense that I had a lot of processed foods, but it's a combination of things. Because even the foods that we think of being healthy are comfort foods from home, carbohydrates may not sit well with one person versus another. So a meal, you think of a typical Caribbean meal, there's a lot of rice on the plate, bananas, the green banana, the yams. Yes, there's a healthy component to it, but there's usually more of that than there is the meat or the protein. All right. When
Mm.
you go to a Caribbean restaurant and you get a plate of food, at least 3/4 of the plate is rice. Then you have um, a couple spoons of meat, whether it be curried goat, oxtails, or whatever the case may be, and then a little bit of cabbage or stewed cabbage on the side, or maybe lettuce and tomato. And if you look at those numbers, it's like, okay, that's pure carbs. That's more than 50%, 60, 70% of carbs on your plate. And that's just one meal. And then for breakfast, of course, now you may have had a breakfast sandwich, a bagel, a donut, cereal, so you already spiked your sugar right there. So your body's busy trying to figure out what to do with that. And it tucks it away really, really fast. And then by 10 o'clock, because based on our work schedule, we're eating quite often. We're told to eat before we even leave home. So we're starting our food off early in the morning, eating before we go home. By the time we get to work, 10 o'clock, we're hungry again because our body has burned off or stored those carbs that we ate that morning. So now you need another snack, and that snack is it might be a sugar bun, more carb, more sugar.
Yeah.
Then lunch, it balances out a little bit, but like I said, depending on where you're eating your lunch, it's quite often quite a bit of carbs in there also. Come dinner time, more carbs. So, just like I said, this constant eating. So now your body's trying to store. And depending what's going on with your liver, because quite a few folks they may not be diagnosed as being pre-diabetic or diabetic, but no one's really testing for their insulin to see if their insulin is high. And I think I had a strong conversation with my brother recently because he was never diagnosed with being diabetic. But when I look at his girth, I said to him, say, you may not be diabetic, but your insulin is high, which means if your insulin is high and you have that girth, there's something going on with your liver, which they may not be paying attention to. So you don't want to get it to the point where you're developing fatty liver disease, non-fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Because the thought is that I'm not a drinker, I'm not a this, I'm not a that. So why would I have fatty liver disease? Not recognizing that excess carbohydrates basically turns into fatty liver disease. And that's one of the key reasons why you have that girth that that we think of. Well, the funny thing is, I was reading an article. Women are more attracted to men with a bigger girth than men who are slim. And it's only because that's what we've conditioned. We've allowed our minds to believe that that is what a man should look like. It's essentially, we've accepted that as being the notion. So when a man comes, even a woman for that matter, because women men admire the women who have the big rear end and that type of thing. So when you're a slim woman, it's like, she couldn't be healthy. So then women tend to, and sometimes without even realizing it, to feel more comfortable being bigger than small, because that's what gets people to smile. So it's one of those some subconscious thing that we go through and we don't even recognize it, that bigger is healthier when it's really not. um yeah, so we really, really have to pay attention to the fact that even though you're not diabetic, doesn't mean you're not running on, your insulin is not excessively high, and fasting, up like you mentioned, helps to battle that. Yeah, just those little markers in life we just don't pay attention to.
Yeah. Um, I know workout and eating, I mean, diets serve two different purposes, but I always have this argument of which one is more effective when in terms of weight loss. What would you say has more effect?
What you eat.
Mm-hmm.
What you eat. The funny thing is, there's a number of people, and especially as you age, I have a number of friends, they work out so they can eat instead of eating proper so they can enjoy life. So that's how I look at it anyway. But I think what you eat has a greater impact on gaining or losing weight.
Yeah, I felt the same too. I know like workout has a place,
Mhm.
and when you're hitting those stagnant moments, you can use that as well and to stay healthier. But yeah, I feel like what you eat has the most effect.
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
and yeah, the whole carb thing, it's the same struggle for me. Like I said earlier, I mentioned the whole meat thing with my culture, but it's really carb heavy as well. So
Uh,
it's like a double whammy of like carbs, which
mhm.
I treat like sugar. In my house, I don't bring too much carb,
Avoid. Mhm.
but I do separate like vegetable carbs from
Mhm.
like bread and pasta and rice.
Good.
I kind of, and fruits when
Mm.
it comes to like sugar. Like, yes, I'll eat a fruit, but I won't eat sugar or any sugary things. So,
Yeah. And here's the thing. So the one thing that you mentioned, the whole thing with carbs. So yes, resistant carbs is heavy within cultures of people of color, and even Caucasians. But I don't think we put enough emphasis on resist, because we'll prepare the carbs, but we usually prepare them and eat them right away quite often, and not prepare them, refrigerated, so the resistant starch builds up and basically it'll pass through us a lot more. We don't always do that. When you think of the people from Asian culture, a lot of the rice that they eat is not the rice that they just prepared. You know, when it comes to sushi, this is rice that has been prepared and chilled, so the resistance structure is built up in that rice, and it actually passes through our bodies a lot more effectively and doesn't get necessarily absorbed. There's that, and the whole thing of the carbs. That's my train of thought again. But the carbs, so we have to pay attention that sometimes it's okay to include certain carbs in that, but you have to look at how and when we eat them. And then when it comes to fruit, so fruit is a big thing, for fruit and fruit juice. For the most part, I don't drink fruit juice anymore because the amount of sugar. Now, not that I don't drink it at all, but I don't need, because often when we drink fruit juice, it's usually in the morning hours. So there goes the sugar up once again. And when it comes to a fruit, I avoid having fruit as a first thing. A lot of people, they'll have a fruit or fruit salad in the morning that is sugar, no matter which way you put it. So I'll have a fruit with a meal. So I have a balance of some kind of fat, protein along with the fruit. I may have the fruit as a dessert. And also when I have a dessert, when I do have dessert, I'll have it as close to when I'm having the meal itself, as opposed to quite often, you have dinner and you wait a couple hours or so, and then you'll have that slice of cake or something of that kind. We don't necessarily, I think at home, or even a bowl of ice cream. Normally that you want that comfort at night, and you may just reach for the ice cream at night. So I make it a point that if I'm going to have dessert, I'm going to have it right after my meal. So that helps me now eat a smaller amount for my dinner, and to make sure I make room for the dessert while I'm having that meal right then and there. So I'm not going to have that late night snack or late night dessert as I would have done in the past. So fruits later in the day, and not the first thing, because that is your sugar spike right there, or your insulin spike. And fruit juice, rare.
Mm. Yeah, I don't do fruit juice because most of those have added sugar
Mm-hmm.
to begin with. But it's interesting you said don't eat fruit in the morning. I had to keep that in mind because it's kind of 50-50 for me, especially summertime.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's either eggs or fruit. And in the summertime, I basically turn into a fruitarian that eats like one meal a day.
Well, do you do yogurt or anything of that kind? Yogurt, cottage cheese?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that helps to balance it out, because if you're eating, like, you'll have fruit, mostly berries are better because berries are low in sugar. So if you're having that with even with your oatmeal, would it be oatmeal or overnight oats, or even quinoa that's soaked, having fruit with that combination as opposed to the fruit by itself is better.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Well, Lorraine, it's been a really amazing conversation. Thank you for spending the time with us talking about nutrition. Is there anything you want to leave the listeners with before we close it out? Anywhere they can find your book, anything that you are promoting?
Yes, so you can follow me on Instagram. I'm Instagram, LinkedIn, and as well as Facebook. Just type my name and I'll come up. Been on the social media for quite some time. And the biggest thing I want people to do is to be their own health ambassador. Don't don't take what your health practitioner says as gospel. Doctors, nurses, dietitians, even myself, what we know is what we know, but there's a whole wealth of things out there that we don't know. And you just can't take someone's word for it just as is. Find out, have the conversation with your doctor, and visiting a doctor shouldn't be a one-way conversation. It should be a two-way. And so that you're making the best decisions for yourself and not just relying on what other people are telling you. But
Yeah, I think
do
that's
have I do have an ebook coming out, Operation Wellness, and that'll be on my website that you can get. It's a free ebook that people can download.
And that's really great advice. To add to that, like things are changing nowadays. There's so many new diseases and ailments coming out because of the new chemicals that are being added in the food and the environment. And even in my research, there's a lot of women that are going into menopause a whole lot earlier in life
Mm.
and having fertility issues and all kinds of issues that are coming up just because there's changes
Mm.
in the environment and food and what we're putting in, and the doctors are not aware of it yet, or the research. There are some doctors that are focusing on certain things, but um, the awareness is not there. So I
Mm.
think it's good to take matters into your own hands.
One thing I might add, because you touched on men a little bit, is that when it comes to prostate, people have prostate challenges, that men should consider cutting back on their carbs, because quite often there is a correlation between the growth hormone insulin and the growth of the prostate. So it should be a consideration. It doesn't mean it's going to resolve the issue 100%, but considering cutting back or lowering the carbs to as close to 50 grams a day would definitely benefit them.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. And for the listeners, I'll have Lorraine's information in the description as well as ours. You can find us on any podcast platform or YouTube. Thank you for listening. Peace.
Right. Thank you, Gypsy.